In Eastern Europe, there have long been rumours of an ancient freshwater monster. It has slithered through the centuries, leaving a string of grisly attacks in its wake, dragging people from the shallows and even tearing off limbs. My name is Jeremy Wade, and my search for this elusive creature will lead me from its remote rural beginnings to the most unlikely refuge, the cooling pond of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, where I'm thrown into a science fiction nightmare, searching for a suspected mutant amid the fallout of the worst nuclear accident the world has ever seen.
So mutant fish, it seems very likely.
My mission is to venture deep behind the former Iron Curtain, to discover this monster's true identity, and in a race against deadly radiation and time, to catch it.
That's the fish. Soviet Ukraine in the 1930s, and a young farmhand tends his cattle. Heading down to the lake to cool off, he secures the cow to his wrist with a length of rope. Suddenly, something grabs his leg and drags him into the water. Still attached to the cow, he shouts the command, "Go, go," and a tug of war begins. Hearing his screams, villagers run to his aid and haul him to safety as the beast retreats. But is there really a creature living in those waters capable of such an attack?
I'm making my way to Ukraine in Eastern Europe, to a village called Assasin at the heart of the lake monster legends. The whole area is permeated by interconnected lakes and waterways, the perfect labyrinth to hide a monster. Beneath the relics of the Soviet Empire lie its rural roots, remote places steeped in pagan folklore and mysticism. Their misty waters are said to be home to vengeful spirits, with ancient ceremonies still performed to appease them. My investigation starts in Assasin, which appears every bit a sleepy rural village. I waste no time and get chatting with the locals, who, on hearing that I'm on the trail of a mysterious lake creature, immediately point me in the direction of a nearby farmer named Anatoly.
Anatoly, people say that you know something about a large creature in the lake.
Напівпроковтнутого сомом на берег і разом з сомом.
Something called a som. They've got a name for this thing. What exactly is a som? What does a som look like?
Набагато зменшена форма кита.
He says it's somewhat similar in shape to a whale.
Щіточки дуже мілкі, але дуже гострі вони.
Lots of small, sharp teeth. He says almost like the bristles on a brush.
Майже нема. Це слізисто такою пленочкою покрите все тіло.
The whole body just has this slimy feel to it.
Люди сприймали і великі, і малі соми. Нормально сприймали, вже привикли до сом. То була піща нормальна.
Fish of 7 to 10 foot used to be a regular occurrence. They would be so big that they'd have to take them away on a horse and cart. And apparently swans and geese from time to time would just disappear from sight. Something would come up and just engulf them whole. Very, very fast-striking, ferocious fish. Do you still have big ones in the lake?
Ну, крупні такі не знаю, але ще от бувають такі випадки, що ловлять по 2 метри довжиною такі суми. Ну, от.
He says he thinks there are still quite big ones there. Fish maybe 7, 8, 9 foot long.
So it seems there's a large, aggressive fish at the heart of these stories. And while I'm not sure of its identity, I do at least have a name. The Som. It's hard to imagine this tranquil village harboring a bloodthirsty monster. But as I search my way through the dawn mist, Assasin Lake takes on a whole new character.
The sun now rising through the mist. It feels like a place where water spirits and 10-foot-long fish could be perfectly possible.
I want to find out what life lurks in the depths of this lake. Trailing a lure behind the boat will allow me to explore a large expanse of water, but without the modern luxury of a motor, it does require some effort.
See the rod tip sort of wobbling away there, which is good. It shows that the bait is working. It's actually swimming with a bit of life. The thought of fish in here getting on for the length of this boat, it does make you feel a little bit vulnerable.
I fish all through the morning without any interest in my lure. Then I come across someone else with a line in the water. Helena lives nearby and fishes here nearly every day.
Do you know anything about big fish in this lake?
Я видела вот здесь недалеко. Метров.
Just off here, about 30 feet off the dock, the water parted and something, well, that was actually the width across its back. A very large fish surfaced. She said it was multicolored. There was a bit of red and blue in there.
Ну, наверное, это был сом.
She says she thinks it was one of these som.
I now focus on the area where Helena saw this fish and switch to casting out my lures.
Yeah. No, that's not a fish. That's not a fish. What's this? I think it's caught on a net. I'm pulling it in because netting is actually illegal here. I can hardly get 2 fingers in one hole, so that is designed for very small fish. It just goes on and on.
There must be over 200 feet of net just in this one spot.
Oh, what's this? There's a pike here. So this is a pike. This is only a small one, but these do grow 4 or 5 feet long. It's a predator, but it's got teeth. The som doesn't, or certainly not teeth like these. And also, the thing I've been hearing about, the width of the body is the length of this. So whatever it was that attacked that boy, pretty certain it wasn't one of these. And it's attacked the bottom of the food chain, and what it means is that everything that depends on the small fish, there's just not enough food.
I wonder how big an impact modern fishing materials have had on this ancient lake. In search of answers, I seek out a man named Petro, one of the village's old-timer fishermen.
Ситуация изменилась в худшую сторону.
The last 20, 25 years, life got a bit hard, but at the same time, you had more availability of cheap fishing line, cheap fishing net.
Сома длиной 1,5 метра.
There aren't the fish now that there used to be. He says he thinks it's not too late, but this place, it seems, is a shadow of its former self at the moment. So I don't disbelieve that there were 7-foot-long fish here once, but it sounds like I might be 20, 25 years too late.
But in a country as vast as Ukraine, could the som still be lurking elsewhere, amid its myriad marshes and interconnecting water channels?
I'm on my way to meet a freshwater spear fisherman, and he claims to have some more recent information about this fish, the som.
His name is Bogdan, and he spent over a decade spearfishing in Ukraine's murky fresh water.
What do you see? What do you hunt here?
Сомов, больших сомов, крупную щуку, сома.
Pike, zander, and som.
Как бы по оценкам порядка 70-80 килограмм.
Very big. He's seen them up to, or getting close to 200 pounds. Are these fish dangerous?
Эта рыба очень опасна. Даже небольшая рыба.
He says these fish are very dangerous, and he knows some real incidents. Apparently a military diver doing sort of repairs. He saw a very large som.
Дайвер не испугался. Он достал нож и завязалась схватка.
So the Somme attacked the diver. The Somme managed to grab hold of his arm or his hand and actually pulled his hand off. And whereabouts did this happen?
В одном из прудов охладителей одной из атомных электростанций.
So apparently this happened in the cooling pond of a nuclear power plant, and people are saying that not only was this fish very large, it was also some kind of a mutant. Which nuclear power station?
Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, site of the worst ever radiological accident in history, and now reportedly home to a giant mutant with a taste for human flesh. But how close dare I go in search of the Somme? I'm in the former Soviet state of Ukraine, exploring an area with a long history of lake monsters, where I've just learnt of a diver reportedly having his hand ripped off by a giant fish, rumoured to live in the cooling pond of the abandoned Chernobyl reactor. In the early hours of April 26, 1986, the safety systems at reactor number 4 were temporarily shut down for an experiment. Moments later, an unexpected power spike caused a series of huge explosions. They tore through the reactor, exposing hundreds of tons of intensely radioactive material to the surrounding environment.
Good evening. That Soviet nuclear disaster is probably the worst in history.
Radioactivity is still being sent into the atmosphere.
With reports that as many as 2,000 people may have been killed and a dangerous fire continues to burn.
Emergency crews battled night and day to control the raging fires.
There was a chemical explosion which caused a core meltdown. That is the most severe of the nuclear accidents that can occur. And an 18-mile security zone has been set up around the site.
Today, nearly 30 years later, this exclusion zone is still under strict military protection and control. Only authorized personnel may enter.
When I set out, I never imagined that I'd end up heading for the site of the world's worst ever nuclear accident, Chernobyl. The question that's on my mind is whether this fearsome fish, the Somme, has survived in the cooling pond. Is it still there? And if it has the radiation maybe caused it to mutate into something potentially even more terrifying?
The word mutant instantly conjures up visions of deformed giants, gargantuan products of ionizing radiation. Could the Somme really have met a similar fate? Very few people are allowed through the gates guarding Chernobyl's exclusion zone.
So there's a lot of control going on here. Very closely guarded zone. Fishing gear has raised questions. This is not a place where fishing is allowed.
Ever since the accident, fishing within the zone has been completely outlawed.
They're being very thorough about checking that I've got everything, that the paperwork's in order.
The authorities approve my preliminary paperwork, and I'm granted temporary access to the periphery of the zone. Chernobyl consists of multiple jurisdictions, much like a Russian doll, each layer giving way to the next, and all requiring a new level of permission. For my own safety, I'm restricted to just 5 consecutive days of exposure.
This is a fishing trip unlike any other. I've got a couple of things here that I wouldn't normally have with me. These will keep track of the total amount of radioactivity that I'm exposed to. But this thing's really my guardian angel. This will go everywhere with me. This will read in real time the level of radioactivity around me. If I'm anywhere where the reading's particularly high, there's an alarm that will go off.
Crucially, though, this device also shows me how close I'm getting to my radiation limit, a maximum set by safety experts that must not be exceeded in my 5 days. Any exposure to radiation incurs an increased risk of cancer, and staying within this limit is essential for my safety. If I reach it, I'll have no choice but to leave Chernobyl immediately. The countdown has begun. Under the gaze of the reactor stands the city of Pripyat. Prior to the accident, it was a thriving community, built to house the thousands of power plant workers and their families. It was a model city for the nuclear age. Now, it lies completely abandoned. To see ancient ruins overrun by vegetation is one thing. To see a modern city like this is something else entirely. And the silence in this place is really quite spooky. What happened here? What was the story? Well, what happened was a mass evacuation. 50,000 people told to leave, and they left in a matter of hours, and they were told that they would be back in 3 days. Well, it's now nearly 30 years, and they never came back. This whole area is still radioactive. It won't return to normal for tens of thousands of years, and the levels of radiation, they vary. There are localized hotspots where the level might be several hundred times what it is just a few feet away. Without my specialized equipment, I'd have no idea what I was being exposed to or how quickly I was approaching my limit. Just as the men, women, and children of Pripyat were unaware of the danger they faced from this invisible threat. The full death toll will never be known, though it's clear that it lies in the thousands and continues to rise to this day. But not all living creatures were able to escape the radiation. There were fish living in the very water that cooled the reactor, and what I need to do now is to find out what happened to them. Did they survive even? And if so, could this be the basis of this story about a huge mutant fish? Many fish can live for well over 30 years. Could there still be fish alive here, trapped ever since the accident? Supersized mutants capable of tearing off human limbs. The cooling pond is a vast man-made lake built to provide water to the power plant reactors along a number of channels. It extends for almost 4 miles before draining into the Pripyat River at its southern end. The whole area seems surprisingly green and healthy above the water, but what about underneath? I'm about to get my first look at something brought up from the radioactive depths. How long will it take for Chernobyl's radioactivity to return to pre-accident levels? It will take millions of years for Chernobyl's radioactivity to return to pre-accident levels. I'm exploring the radioactive waters around Chernobyl, looking for a suspected mutant fish accused of ripping a man's hand clean off. There's clearly some kind of life in these waters, but am I about to pull up a mutant?
Well, that's a lovely pike. This fish actually looks perfectly formed. I think this doesn't look like any kind of mutant fish.
This may be bigger than the pike I found in the village, but even a pike of record-breaking size couldn't remove a man's hand.
Fish, that's a fish. This is a really nice sized perch. Very characteristic spiky dorsal fin. Also these vertical black bars. Lovely coloration on the other fins. And it's a predator, very aggressive predator, very big mouth relative to size of body.
These perch don't grow big enough to drag a man into the water, but their presence is encouraging. It suggests the healthy fish numbers required to sustain a large predator like Assasin.
Well, there are fish in here, and, well, some very nice-looking fish. What's going on at the cellular level in that fish, though, is open to question.
Much of the most serious radiological damage is invisible to the naked eye. Therefore, the only way to understand the true effects the disaster has had on the fish is through specialized scientific research. I've arranged to meet a scientist who spent years studying the effects of radiation on Chernobyl's wildlife. But before I can venture deeper into the zone, I must undergo a scan at a control portal, still 6 miles from the core.
It's time for a contamination check. I'll need to do this on a regular basis as I move around the zone.
The machine detects radioactive particles. Any contamination on my body would sound an alarm.
That's clean. I'm on my way to meet Tim Rousseau from the University of South Carolina, who's done numerous radiological studies on animals in the zone.
To limit his exposure, Professor Rousseau only makes brief trips to the zone, but he's been doing so for over 12 years. Most recently, to study the birds. To me, this looks a perfectly healthy bird, and we're in the middle of this very green landscape. Is it true to say things are getting back to normal?
No, things are actually continuing to get worse here. We're seeing many fewer species and many fewer numbers, and we know that this is because the birds are not living as long, the insects are dying, and the males are frequently sterile. His probability of surviving from now until next year is less than half of what it would be in a clean area. We'll put him in the bag for now and just tie that up tight.
What was the magnitude of the event that happened here?
Something on the order of between 200 and 400 atomic bombs, equivalent to the ones that were dropped on Hiroshima. It was a nuclear fire that burned for 10 days, just spewing radioactive materials. And much of this zone is still maybe half to a third as contaminated as it was the day after the event stopped.
So how prevalent is mutation? What are you finding?
It's everywhere. Essentially every organism shows some level of mutation.
So mutant fish, I mean, that's not something out of science fiction. That's perfectly possible here.
It seems very likely. Every time it rains, we get runoff, and this carries with it a substantial amount of cesium, and it gets into the water, so it's very likely that the fish are picking up a significant dose from their diet.
Professor Mousseau's research seems to show that little has escaped radiation's deadly reach. Radioactive substances like cesium and plutonium can have catastrophic effects on living tissues, causing mutations, cancers, and death. And perhaps no more so than at the bottom of the cooling pond, where all that radioactive material has been accumulating since the accident. Could it be serving as a nuclear nursery, rearing mutant SOM capable of the attack that Bogdan described?
Oh. That was just my alarm going off. Must have just passed a radiological hotspot. I don't know, something in the undergrowth maybe beside the road.
The ghostly scenes all around me feel a million miles from home. But the reality is that the United States alone has over 100 nuclear reactors, each one with the potential to go catastrophically wrong. It's therefore vital to learn as much as possible about the radiological impact in disaster zones such as Chernobyl. Although few studies have been done into the fish, one man does have experience in this area. Dmitry Gudkov is head of radioecology at Ukraine's National Academy of Science, and we meet at an abandoned Soviet fish hatchery. Apparently he has a photo of a som to show me.
Я могу вам показать фотографии, чтобы вам было более понятно. Вот, да, это сом.
Gosh, that's... Hold on, that's strange looking. That... Okay. No, I know this fish, but a different name. This is a Wells catfish.
What they call a som, I know as a wels. The physical descriptions match, and so too does the behavior. The Wells catfish can grow to over 250 pounds and can be very aggressive, easily capable of the attack on the villager and perhaps even wrenching the diver's hand off.
This looks like a Wells catfish, except there's something very strange going on with its mouth. It seems to have two lower jaws. Is this a mutation?
Провести какие-то дополнительные исследования на этом виде рыб.
He's saying that to really understand whether there's any mutations in these fish, you've got to do laboratory analysis, and they haven't actually done any work on these Wells catfish. The reason being they haven't actually had a specimen to work on. Almost like looking at the flight recorder, the black box of an aircraft, it will give you a really, really good insight into what's happening with the fish here. But as yet, that work hasn't been done. I've caught big som before. Maybe I can help you here. What if I could give you a specimen? Would that be useful?
Да, конечно, это будет крайне полезно, но для того, чтобы поймать эту рыбу, нужно получить соответствующее разрешение.
I could potentially help here. I could catch a large fish, but he's saying this is not the kind of place where you just turn up and fish. This is a controlled zone. I would need to go through a process of permission before I could even get near the water.
This is no longer simply about my investigation into myths from a sleepy corner of Eastern Europe. It's grown a whole lot bigger. If a catfish can shed light on the biological effects of a disaster on the scale of Chernobyl, it could be the most important fish I'll ever catch. Thanks to my unique collaboration with Dmitry, I'm granted permission. I'm going to be the first person allowed to fish for a Wells on the cooling pond. Progressing through to the next layer, I arrive at the pumping station that supplies water to the pond from the Pripyat River. I meet my guide, Vlad, who suggests that the edge of this churned up, oxygenated water could be a good spot for catfish, and offers to fish for bait while I rig my lines.
Something going on here.
Suddenly, Vlad is shouting from the other bank.
What is it? Here it is. Yeah.
Something from the radioactive depths is on his line, and it's clearly much bigger than mere bait. I'm in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, where I followed the trail of a lake monster from its ancient rural roots to the most unlikely modern refuge, the cooling pond of Chernobyl's reactor number 4. The creature that locals call a som I know as a Wells catfish, and I've been granted unprecedented access to fish on the pond.
Is it? Here it is.
While trying to catch bait on light line, my guide Vlad has unexpectedly hooked into something big.
What happened? Did the line go?
It was a catfish.
The fish was almost within reaching distance. I saw that fish. That was a good sized fish. But something just gave in the gear at the end. What was interesting though is it took a moving lure. I mean, that could be, you know, that one got away, but that could be the way to get them on that kind of lure, but just heavier gear.
I'm amazed to see that a Wells catfish has survived just a stone's throw from the reactor. Losing a good fish is always disappointing, but it has given me a vital pointer. I'm going to rig plastic lures on stronger line and cast directly into the turbulent water. I have 3 days to get a result.
Even though I'm fishing from the bank, I'm still making a point of wearing my life jacket because the worst radiation is actually on the bottom of the lake, so I don't really want to be going anywhere near that. This is a zander. It's what they call a pike perch. And this is a healthy-looking fish, so this is surprising, you know, not what you'd expect necessarily in this place.
And it's got a healthy set of teeth to match.
Catfish probably are lying near the bottom. They're not going to see much down there. They're going to feel vibrations. Yeah, there's one here.
But I can't get through the aggressive zander.
One thing about zander is they have these very big eyes. They are sight feeders. They're really good at seeing down near the bottom in low light.
Frustratingly, though, the bottom of the water column is precisely where I'm working my lures for the catfish.
Well, the zander are getting bigger at least. It's actually quite a beautiful scene with the sun going down, but that is actually what's left of reactor number 4. When I watched this place go up on the television all those years ago, I think the last thing on my mind was that one day I'd be here fishing. The novelty is definitely wearing off now. These things are so active, so hungry. It reminds me a little bit of piranhas in the Amazon, just you know, eating the bait or getting to it before anything else can. So these are in my mind now, the piranhas of Chernobyl.
Normally, a good way to increase the chance of a catfish would be to fish into the night. But here, I'm under a strict after-dark curfew. I've now got just 2 days left of my allotted time, and the pressure is mounting. I have to think constantly about radiation safety. Each evening I test all my gear, checking it thoroughly for radioactive particles that I may have pulled up from the pond. But as a catch and release fisherman, I've also been wrestling with the exceptional circumstances of my challenge.
There have been instances in the past where fish that I've caught have helped scientists acquire knowledge. The thing that's different about this is that I'm going to have to hand the fish over, and I'm not completely comfortable about that.
But ultimately, the information that could be gained from even one fish in this unique situation, I believe makes such a sacrifice wholly justifiable. With time so precious, I decide to stick to the method which so nearly proved successful.
Oh, something hit that on the drop, on the drop. This is a new fish, different fish. Again, it's just completely inhaled that bait. That looks like a fish called a chub. Big mouth, cylindrical, powerful body.
Again, it's not the suspect I'm after, but I am encouraged. This is what was missing from the lake in Somin, an abundance of perfect prey for a hungry giant catfish.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I've got slime on the line here. I might have had a catfish investigate that. All right, let's get it out again quickly.
Catfish secrete an antibacterial mucus that covers their whole body. Slime on my line is tantalizing evidence that I'm getting closer.
It's a fish.
Yet again, though, I don't seem to be able to get past the ravenous zander to reach the catfish. It's time for a tactical rethink. The bright lures I've been using so far are attracting too much attention from the sharp-eyed competition. Catfish rely largely on vibration to detect their prey, so I changed to a duller lure in the hope of avoiding the zander. But there seems to be no fooling them.
These fish here are turning out to be much, much harder than I'd anticipated. Now, normally what you do is you just keep fishing, but here, with the issue of radiation, I'm absorbing radiation the whole time that I'm here. They take safety very seriously. There is a very, very strict limit on how much time I can spend here. So there is some real urgency now about finding this fish.
With pressure mounting, I decide to head off around the pond's perimeter in the hope that some different spots may change my fortunes.
Right, this bit of water here, I've heard that the fish are sometimes seen down here when the weather's warmer, but I'm not going to fish here because my alarm just keeps going off.
But now, my efforts are either thwarted by dangerous levels of radiation, or the water simply appears lifeless.
Well, this is another part of the lake, but it just seems dead. There's nothing doing here at all. I'm finding it hard to stay optimistic when it feels that everything is all turning against me. The layers of bureaucracy, while all the time my exposure to radiation is steadily increasing. I'm starting to wonder if I might have taken on something which is going to turn out to be impossible.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. There's one area where catfish have been consistently spotted, but it lies on the very channels that were used to feed the reactor. Even if I can secure permission, will fishing this close to the core put me into radiation overload? It's a huge gamble, but I've come too far to turn back now. I'm in Ukraine in a race against radiation and time, working with scientists on the trail of a suspected mutant catfish accused of a grisly attack in the radioactive waters of Chernobyl. So important is the need for a specimen that the authorities have made the ultimate exception, granting me permission to fish on the very arteries leading to the heart of the reactor. But being this close, can I catch that fish before I reach my exposure limit?
My alarm's just gone off. And this isn't, and again, and again, and again. And this isn't because of anything, any dust on the ground or a localized hotspot or anything. Our sound recorder's just going off as well. The reason this is going off now is because that is the nucleus of the whole place. That's reactor number 4. That is where nearly 30 years ago a 3,000-foot tongue of flame shot into the air, showering radioactive debris into the surrounding area.
I don't have much time before I reach my limit, so I'm switching up to heavier, more robust gear. This is my last day. Time is ticking, and so is my dose meter. Suddenly, I'm hooked into something big, and it's pulling me closer and closer to the radioactive water.
It's off. Came off the hook. That might be my only chance here. Might be my only chance. It's off the hook. It started swimming towards me. I don't know. There was a big fish on my line very briefly here, right in the shadow of the reactor. I felt the weight of the fish. It was a heavy fish. But the hook came out. I mean, the weight that I felt should have set the hook, so I really don't know. Sometimes the hook will not hold, and of all the times for that to happen, it happened here.
It's a soul-crushing failure, but I can't give up. There's clearly something big out there, but I'm getting ever closer to my radiation limit. The only option is to persist on the channel in the hope that losing that fish hasn't spooked any others nearby. I can't afford any mistakes. If there's any interest in my bait, I absolutely have to set the hook securely. I'm in Chernobyl, Ukraine, fishing the very channels leading to the ill-fated reactor, searching for a Cold War mutant accused of ripping a diver's hand clean off. My body is being constantly bombarded by radiation, and I'm teetering right on the edge of my time limit, when finally, I set the hook.
It's a fish, a fish. Wait. I need the gloves.
Until this fish is analysed by Dimitri, I've no idea how radioactive it is and what risk it poses to me.
So this is it. This is the som. Long, dark, tapering body shape, the wide head, slimy skin, tentacles, teeth a bit like a worn-down brush. Yeah, absolutely positive ID.
I'm finally holding the biological black box I've been searching for. I may have caught bigger, but never a fish as extraordinary or significant as this. Dimitri's research will later reveal that far from being the mutant giant of science fiction, this Chernobyl catfish is under half the normal size for its age, its stunted flesh harbouring 16 times the usual level of radiation.
So I came to Ukraine to investigate stories of a fearsome water monster living in a remote, rural corner of the country, only to find it long gone. The victim, as is so often the case everywhere, of relentless human progress. So how strange that I should find this fish here, the site of the world's worst radiological disaster.
The ancient Somme of Ukraine live on as Chernobyl's radioactive river monsters. For behind-the-scenes stories, fishing games and more, go to animalplanet.com/rivermonsters.